I was at CEX not long ago, looking for some deals, as you do, when I came across this generic-looking PS2 racing game, Road Rage 3. And I didn't think much of it at first, until I looked a little closer and saw the publisher. Phoenix Games. Now, if you frequent comedy retro game reviewers, you are no doubt familiar with Phoenix Games' work, but just in case, these are the guys who developed such classics as Dalmatians 3, Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys, and of course, who can forget, White Van Racer. So yeah, these guys have a reputation of putting absolute, irredeemable crap onto the PS2, but then I looked a little closer and noticed the developer. Atlus. The Atlus. One of the most coveted, prolific, beloved, honored game developers in the world! And its logo is next to Phoenix Games? What? Phoenix Games and Atlus. You may not realize just how much of a dichotomy this is. Phoenix Games are categorically and inarguably the worst games on the PS2. Often the best things about them are hilariously bad cartoons that come packaged in with a collection of terrible minigames. Atlus, on the other hand, are legendary for all the right reasons. They've been making classics since the third generation, and to this day are still releasing landmark titles, and as they often only have one print run, they are also some of the most collectible games ever made. They've made stuff like Catherine, Jack Brothers, Amazing Tater, and freaking Persona, while old Feeny has made White Van Racer and 100 different reskins of the same memory card game. Apart from their games, it seems no one really knows that much about them. Their website hasn't existed for years, and they've only really emerged into the collective social consciousness through coverage of their games on YouTube. What dark and clement transpirations brought about this unforeseeable union? The world may never know. But the real question is, did Atlus's light shine through, or was it blotted by Phoenix's darkness? Or did they mix together to form some sort of forgettable grey mass spun into a PS2 disc? Well, let's check the back for clues, shall we? Well, overall it's a damn sight better than Phoenix's usual fare of this demented jester frog thing. Screenshots look okay, Race against speed freaks and adrenaline junkies on tough mountain tracks. Mountain tracks? I would have thought something called Road Rage 3 would be about street racing. Engage in time trials and intense 400-meter races. Wait, 400 meter? That's a quarter mile. You doing drag races? Race against the famous Drift King. Wait, drifting? In drag races? On mountains? What kind of game is this? Oh, but that's not the best. Here's my favorite one right here at the bottom. 2-player mode available. I'm sure it is. But let's not put it off any longer. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and that magical Mobius rainbow in between and beyond, I present to you Atlus and Phoenix Games' Road Rage 3. There it is, Phoenix Games. And there's Atlus, unfathomably hot in its heels. Oh, it looks like Cave is a part of this too. They're most well known for holding the world record for producing the most bullet hell shooters. Curiouser and curiouser. Despite what the name might imply, Road Rage 3 isn't a street racer or derby racer or even really arcade style at all. In fact, I'd say it's pretty far up near the sim end of the spectrum. Instead, the racing is fairly tame with an emphasis on drifting. The physics are a little more slidey than usual, and as you drift, you fill up a drift meter, which adds to your drift score, but we'll come back to that later. For now, I'm just relieved that this is an actual game and not just a VCD of Cars Life.
You are annoying! Speedy! Speedy!
So yeah, a racing game, and thankfully not a white van in sight. In fact, the cars are all real models from a number of different Japanese car manufacturers like Mazda, Honda and Subaru, with a large selection of cars available from the very start in 3 different performance classes. And you don't need to buy them to use them in the Battle King career mode. Indeed, there's no money at all, and while you can unlock a few more cars and parts as the game goes on, there are a couple cars available at the beginning with maxed out stats, so it's not so much an improvement as simply more options. Each car really does feel different in the way they handle. Some are really sprightly and loose, while others are a bit more solid, and at least one seems to have tyres made of Elmer's glue. It's the Civic, don't choose the Civic. And they're upgradable too, with you being able to fully customize the suspension as standard, and in the options menu there are also some robust calibration settings, but that's a bit over my head.
Sir, layman as I may be, I can guarantee you with certainty that in the standard operation of an automobile, the engine is, in fact, used.
Yeah, the part unlocks are a little weird. Sometimes it works for a car and sometimes it doesn't. But it generally just opens up more options for you to tweak. What's also interesting is that you can customize the front and rear rims independently. That's gotta be a first. And you can even customize your turbo blow-off sound of all things. Speaking of sounds, this is one car that's really cute and it sounds like a horsey. And listen, the cars backfire randomly from time to time. That was someone's job for a day, to make the cars backfire. That just tickles me. The progression is quite unique. When you start, there are only 4 available courses arranged onto this map, with a race, being a lap around the course with 2 opponents, and a battle, being a lap around the course in the other direction with 1 opponent. As you complete each one, they get ticked off and you unlock new cars, parts and courses, and eventually event races in the form of either drift or drag races. The racing feels good, very good in fact. It threw me for a loop a bit at first because of the drift-based cornering that I'm not really used to, but once I found a car I liked, it was fine. There's even a little guide in the manual on cornering technique. But don't confuse solid for simple or easy, because this game will grind you down like a Mustang's tires leaving a car show.
Or indeed, more often than not, the Mustang itself.
This game is demanding as all heck. Your opponents are almost always quicker off the line than you are, meaning you need to be really good at driving to get ahead, and there are no prizes for second place. The controls rely a lot on a car's momentum going around the corner, so weight plays a big part in your car choice. And while I would describe the controls as good, there's one hell of a steep learning curve. You learn to start using the guardrails to take turns wider, in the process losing your drift meter, because if you hit the sides of the course, then you lose all that you earned on that drift. But if you work hard and start to get good, it's hella addicting to nail a turn perfectly. And then inevitably you'll get overconfident and use the handbrake on a sharp turn and...
Then there was trouble.
And when you do spin out and end up eating guardrail, you'll hit the brake to start reversing, but it won't work. Then you try every other button you can think of before realizing that you have to downshift through every gear, including neutral, to get to reverse, then back up, straighten out, come to a fully complete stop, shift through neutral back into first, and then you can resume. Christ, even Gran Turismo gave you a semi-automatic gearbox, but not Road Rage 3. If you make a mistake, you will live with it. So basically, if you spin out, it's impossible to win. With the time you lose, it's just not going to happen. Except maybe in that available 2-player mode. Even worse than that, you can accidentally put it into neutral or even reverse while you're on the start line, which is just embarrassing. But the worst part when it comes to what this game expects from you is in the event drift races. In this mode, getting across the line first doesn't matter. In fact, your opponent doesn't matter at all. Screw them. All you need to do is get the requisite amount of drift points, which normally isn't that hard, it's often quite a small amount, without touching the sides of the course.
It doesn't sound that hard, just get the points, don't touch the sides. Easy. But no, what that's actually like saying is like saying, here, eat this cookie, but if you crunch down on a single chocolate chip, I'll rip your toenails out with barbecue tongs.
It is so hard to go even the partial lap they ask of you without touching anything. The slightest brush of even the grass from the tiniest late braking or overcorrection, and it's all over. I'd often try for over 15 minutes straight, just constantly crashing and restarting, and to prove it, here's the Keith Shizwo montage of all the crashes in one average attempt to complete an event drift race.
3, 2, 1, go!
Looking at. But I tell you, the feeling of ecstasy after literally dozens of restarts when you finally finish a whole race perfectly is just unparalleled with any other racing game I've ever played.
Cleared!
Yes! Woo! 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 I beat you! You fought at my car! Woo! Yeah! Right, let's play the next one then.
And it feels so good to do the little ritual of entering your name at the end. This game demands perfection. You need to be one with your car, all of which have really different characteristics. You need to practice, you need discipline, and when you achieve that, you really feel it. One thing that helps this is the length of the courses. They're usually only 1 lap or less, totaling around 1.5 minutes, so it never feels like it's a waste of time to have to restart, just a wasted opportunity. There's a pretty good variety of courses, from racetracks to sealed mountain roads with scenery like a mountain that looks like a waffle, and a thing that looks exactly like a shortcut but actually isn't because you can't drive over a 5-inch curve. They also have their own individual time of day and weather effects, and when you press the circle button you can turn out your headlights and become a ninja car! And look, even the lights on the dashboard go out. That's really cool. And another little tip for when you're in the dark is that you can use your opponent's approaching headlight to block them, but that's just dirty. Overall, the courses are very well designed and fun to drive on, especially with the amount of speed you get going downhill, and they all play into the drift mechanic very well. If I had one criticism, it's that for the most part they're very tight with the corners, not having much room to maneuver. I want room to stretch and to express myself with skid marks and tire smoke, but it is one of the big contributors to the game's challenge, so it gets a pass. The tracks are also decorated with billboards and banners of the car brands, and even Atlus and Cave. Conspicuous by its absence is Phoenix Games, which is nowhere to be found. Oh yeah, this is a Phoenix game. How did that even happen? This game is good. Like, actually good. And it bears the same shield as all these soulless discs.
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong.
I know Atlus made games for LJN back in the 80s, but Phoenix Games is closer to that crackpot who made Action 52. They showed pride in their crappy lumps of plastic. At least Phoenix only charged £9 for their games, at least according to their website, not $200. And speaking of their website, there's Road Rage 3, front and center in a way-back machine capture from 2003. They even published another Drift Racer a couple years later, but that's a story for another time. If each of those map region things is a course, then there are about 20-ish, making about 60 races in the career mode, which I'm very tempted to complete because of the way you progress. Purchase-based games like Gran Turismo 4 are like, there's so much to do! Whereas here there's a constant sense of achieving something and literally ticking it off the list. And the difficulty kind of makes this the racing equivalent of Dark Souls, telling you to get good, and you want to get good because to win feels like mastery. The controls aren't the problem. You have the tools to win, you just need to learn how to use them. And for those so inclined, there are a myriad of adjustments and calibrations you can make to get it just right. Although one more thing that would have been cool would be custom rule sets in the drift races in the very available 2-player mode.
So my question is, why is this game called something like Road Rage 3? It's not based around damaging cars, quite the opposite. And where's Road Rage 1 and 2? Well, in true Phoenix Games fashion, 1 and 2 don't exist. You see, This game is actually a translation of a Japanese game called Togue 3.
If you've never heard of Togue, it's a discipline of racing, which is basically this game. 2 races, thin winding roads, a lot of drifting, etc. And the Togue series has been produced by Atlus and Cave exclusively in Japan for years to a decent amount of critical acclaim. Well, the first game came out in America, but that was on the Saturn, so no one really cares. So Togue 3 is the 6th game in the series, go figure, but they're hardly the worst offender in that sort of thing. And somewhere along the line, someone wanted to bring Togue 3 to the West. Phoenix Games got to publish it, THQ got to distribute it, and that's about as much as we know. But what's really cutting my cables is how generic the name is. I mean, Road Rage? Bloody Road Rage? Togue is perhaps the least ragey discipline in racing. It's calculated, deliberate, skill-based. Given Phoenix's past, or future, naming experience, I'll bet they either didn't know or didn't care. Probably both, and just slapped on the first name that came into their head. 2-player mode available.
And that's the story, as far as I know, of the strange case of Road Rage 3. And as there are no credits in either the game or the manual, there's no way to dig up more information on this strange collaboration. Phoenix would never work on a AAA game again, or with anything resembling a legitimate game company, or indeed legitimate game for that matter. And they vanished into obscurity as the death knell of the PS2 began to toll. So on a scale of playing it to hating it, where does Road Rage 3 lie? Well, I think the gimmick of having Atlus and Phoenix on the same box art is gimmick enough to make this worth a definite keeper. But even if it wasn't, this game is pretty addicting, it's got good graphics and a rocking soundtrack. Well worth a keeping it.
Actually, there might be a version of this game without both logos. There's a picture floating around on the internet that shows the cover of this case with just the Phoenix logo, but I've only found it associated with German copies of the game on eBay. I haven't actually been able to find a photograph of the game with this cover. It's also got an ELSPA rating, and all the other photos I can find either have a PEGI rating or an ACB rating, like my copy. So I'm not actually sure if any physical copies with this cover design exist, and I'm not willing to spend the money to find out. But hey, get a load of the French cover. Yeah, this one's real.
To be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed. I mean, whenever you pick up a game with the Phoenix Games logo on it, you expect some real... Wait, that's it? Wait, where's the rest of my footage? I shot a whole ending to this months ago. Great, it's lost. I can't reshoot it because the entire wall's different now. I have to think of a new ending. If only there was some sort of pop culture reference I missed when I first wrote this script, but what kind of reference could you make about a Japanese drift racing game with a black and white painted Toyota Sprinter Trueno AE86 on the cover? What's that music?
Deja vu, I've just been in this place before. Higher on the street, and I know it's my time to go. Calling you, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I try to be me. Oh, deja vu, I've just been in this time before. Higher on the beat, and I know it's a place to go. Calling you, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I try to be me.
Yeah, that'll do, I guess. Wait, something's happened. Don't get any closer! It was an accident. I was just reviewing Britney's dance beat and... How is this happening? No! What have you done?
Can't explain now, but the spirit world and digital world are more intertwined than most know.